All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. From the philosopher and writer Blaise Pascal. In a room alone, sit quietly. You kidding? Isn't that difficult? But he says the humanity's problems could be solved if only we were able to sit quietly with ourselves. Indeed, for most of us, sounds like hell. Mm-hmm. Most people cannot stand being alone, sitting still, quiet, with nothing to occupy their minds. Can you relate to it? It's natural. It gets very uneasy, extremely uncomfortable, and painful. Painful. We become nervous, unable to relax, restless for something to do, something to occupy our minds, something to take our attention away, something to take our attention away from the uncomfortable moment, to escape into some sort of distraction away from ourselves. Why do we need a distraction? Why can't be with ourselves? It seems that we have to work on this. We need to evaluate and prioritize its importance in our lives. This cannot happen to us. Sooner or later, we'll have to confront it. Sooner or later, we should be okay being with ourselves, by ourselves, alone, in a quiet room. But why do we need so desperately to be distracted? Why is it that we cannot tolerate? What is that we cannot tolerate about being alone with ourselves? What is that we can't stand about being still, quiet, in silence? Is this a state of anxiety and desperation to escape from our own unsettling feelings what boredom is all about? In the inability to sit with ourselves, we try to put our attention somewhere else, but in time, we keep coming back to it. We keep returning to that uneasy state, the state of boredom. Well, maybe we should see the bright side of it. Maybe we should see this as an opportunity, as an invitation from us to be and stay with ourselves. An invitation from us to come back home, to go within. Good morning, everyone. I hope you don't find this boring, but welcome to Ramakrishna Monastery. And if you notice, our topic today is a spiritual boredom. Do you relate to this? Yes. All of us. So true. I remember when I started my spiritual journey, I was in a meeting, just like this one, and we were discussing the topic of Japan. You know what Japan is? Doing the beads, the repetition of the name of God. A prayer. You keep repeating the name of God. And someone interrupted the speaker, the lecturer. I said, well, excuse me, but that sounds very boring. And I was struck. I was like, what was that? Well, to me, it feels as if sucking rusted nails. I was like, wow, that is a very hard statement. We are supposed to enjoy the repetition of the name of God. So why do we get bored? Well, it's true. Sometimes we feel weary simply because we are unable to occupy our minds in something interesting. And I will come back to this word, interesting. We are unable to occupy our minds in something interesting. Sometimes we are just simply restless, wanting to do something but not knowing exactly what to do. Maybe we find ourselves in a monotonous routine and we suddenly find that it's not very exciting anymore. Maybe you suddenly want to be in a different place, somewhere else, away from yourself. But when we take our body somewhere away, we realize it's not the place. It's not a specific situation or task. It's ourselves. Did you experience this in your life? Yes. I want to take a break of myself. I'm going to go to Maui. And when you go to Maui, you are like scratching your head. You feel restless. Should I go to the beach or not? Should I go hiking? Or stay in my room reading? Then why did I come here? I could have done that in my room. These days, it's amazing the opportunities we have to move away from ourselves. It's so easy to find sources of distraction that makes us feel elated and entertained. But again, we keep coming back to that uneasy state. Staring at our phones, scrolling up and down social media, binging streaming shows. You get tired of it. Yet, you keep doing it. We have to get to the root of the problem. Why do I need to stay distracted? Why can't I be with myself? Why can't we just sit with the discomfort and try to understand what is exactly what I want? Try to find answers, examine and explore what is the problem. Is it just my problem? I don't think so. It is everybody's problem. Don't feel lonely. It happens to all of us. Why not resolve it then? We can't just ignore it, pretend it's not there, no matter how you try to bury it under different sources of pleasures and distractions. These only provide temporary relief. Let's try to find the courage to confront it, to face it, to go straight to the root of it. Because boredom could be an important signal in our lives, particularly in our spiritual lives. When we try to sit quietly with ourselves, trying to meditate, no external stimuli, eyes closed, if something is constantly pulling us outside of ourselves, we need to pay attention to the source of it. If in my meditation boredom arises, like, what am I doing with a flower on the top of my head, sitting in front of an image? That is a description of a pujari. It's a ritual in India. We sit in front of an image that represents our idea, our symbol of God, and we perform this ritual. One of the parts of the ritual was supposed to put a flower on our heads and meditate. What if all of a sudden you start asking yourself, what am I doing here? I have so many things to do. I could be somewhere else. This is boring. Nothing is happening. I've got so much to do. This is the opportunity we have to actually look into what's coming up and stop ignoring, denying, pushing away something that is coming up from within when we try to stay still. And it's that inner chat saying, give me something more interesting to do. Give me something I can find interest in. Give it to me right now. Can't stand myself. Guess what? We will also find boredom in our spiritual life. Some of you yesterday were asking me, what is that about, Swami? Really? Boredom is all around us. Even in our spiritual pursuit. But let's talk about it. Really? When you start getting bored, it's like, have you ever heard from the Don Quixote, I think it's Don Quixote in Spanish? How do you say it in English?
Don Quixote.
Really? Just like that? All right, then. I can use my Spanish pronunciation. Don Quixote. He goes, barking dogs, it's a sign that we are galloping forward. The dogs are barking, Don Quixote. And he replies, a sign we are moving forward, Sancho. A sign we are moving forward. When we confront ourselves with this type of uncomfort, boring situation in our spiritual life when we try to meditate, this is a sign we are moving forward, my friends. It's not too bad. It's not bad at all. It has to happen. It's bound to happen, in fact. It's not you. It's what needs to be understood. The only real antidote to boredom is to confront boredom. So, yes, we can sit still, go within, and find the only source of bliss. You keep looking in distractions. Learn more about yourselves. Learn more about the mind. You don't have to be scared of boredom. We have to embrace it. So, let's sit and get bored. Spiritual life is all about mastering this boredom. Did you think it was that easy? Embrace that routine and stay present. By embracing the routine, don't get me wrong, you can allow yourself to have distractions, to go on vacations every once in a while, but you cannot escape from yourselves. First things first, find interest in dealing with yourself. Be interested, be passionate about finding a solution to everybody's problem. Are you? Because there is no way out if you want to find peace. Then we should be able to sit quietly in a room alone and be okay with it. How about sitting alone in that room alone with someone or something you love? Could be a human being or your dog, your cat, your pet. Does that sound boring? No TV, no nothing. Just you and your beloved. Sounds sweet, doesn't it? So the answer then is to fall in love with ourselves. Then only we can be still, pleased, content. Just like when we are right next to our object of love. The example is not perfect though, because any object is subject to change. But you get the idea, don't you? The answer is that we have to fall in love with ourselves. In the fourth chapter, fourth value of the Taittiriya Upanishads, we find Bhrigu, the son of Varuna, approaching his father and asking, "Venerable Sir, teach me about Brahman." Brahman in Vedanta is the ultimate reality, the one without a second Brahman. That is of existence, absolute, awareness of consciousness, absolute, and bliss, absolute, which is our own true, real nature. By now, you should accept this. The scriptures say that we are divine beings, and the goal of life is to manifest that divinity, express it fully in our lives. So, Varuna says, he realized that bliss. He realized that bliss of Brahman. From that bliss, it's called Ananda in Sanskrit, verily are these beings born by bliss. When born, do they live into bliss. At the time of dissolution, do they enter? Do they merge? This is the wisdom taught by Varuna and learned by Bhrigu. It is established in the supreme Akasha in our hearts. Akasha means a space within us. This inner bliss is within us. He who knows this is established in the bliss of Brahman. How do you like that? Can be boring. We only need to fall in love with this. Be deeply interested. Deeply interested. I'll come back to that. Apuryamana machala pratishtam samudramapa pravishanti yadvat tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sashanti mapnoti nakama kami. This is a verse from the Bhagavad Gita, chapter number 2, verse number 70. Just as water flows into the ocean that is brimful and still, just as water flows into the ocean that is brimful and still, so too the wise person into whom all objects enter remains in peace. All the objects of the senses enter in us through our senses. But this man remains still, remains in peace. Whereas the desirer of objects does not gain that peace. I know, it's a little hard now, because we so desire so many things. What is your experience by now? Don't you have enough experience? It's never enough. You get more restless. What next? What next? What next? It has a beginning and it has an end. It never lasts long. That is our experience. The ocean requires no water to be full. The ocean does not move from place to place like us, in the same way that the river does. The ocean does not depend on any source of water for its fullness. The wise person is full in his own nature. Everyone has this sense of fullness when desires are fulfilled. Only when desires are fulfilled. But then what? Another desire comes. And you want to be full permanently, forever. But eventually the person finds himself or herself not full anymore. It didn't last long. A wise person, on the other hand, does not depend on anything for his or her fullness, because the self, capital self, is already full, like the ocean. The self, our inner nature, is ananda, bliss, and has no limit. Thus, recognition of the self is the very reason for the person's being full and experiencing its fullness. I am, which we all say, is by itself fullness. I am enough with myself should become real in our lives. The I should be understood as it is, and it happens to be bliss, ananda. The wise person is one who is happy without depending upon any object or situation. Like the ocean, the wise person is full by his or her own glory, by his or her own nature. in chapter number 6, from the Bhagavad Gita, verse number 35, Sri Krishna admits the nature of the mind and what to do in order to master it. Because guess what the problem is? Our minds. But we are not the mind. We are the observer of the mind. We are the ever-present consciousness. We are the ever-present consciousness, here and now. Asamshayam mahabaho mano durni graham chalam abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena chagruhyate. That's the Sanskrit for Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, the Blessed Lord said, no doubt, O Arjuna, O mighty arm, he was a warrior, the mind is restless, agitated, and difficult to control, difficult to master. But Arjuna, it is mastered by constant practice and dispassion. Here's the secret. Constant practice of what, Swami? Dispassion. I'm full of passions. No problem. Let's work on this. So, the problem of us being bored and comfortable with ourselves is not in us, but in our inability to understand our own mind, the functioning of our mind. The nature of the mind, Krishna says, is chanchalam, agitation, restlessness. Because of this, the mind is difficult to control. You can't control the mind. But you can observe it. You can understand how it works and tame it. Don't try to get rid of that agitation, thinking that it's something you can solve, says Krishna. We have to accept it. It is what it is. Our minds keep jumping from one thought to another. That's the nature of it. Restlessness. Constantly changing in a constant state of flux. And I guess it's good that way. It's more fun. Imagine being just unable to think, but only one thought, and that's not the thought of God. Boring. Therefore, we have to embrace this. The mind needs to change so that it can perceive the moving world, everything that is moving in the outside. The mind has its own rules and logic. You may not be aware of it, but the mind never misses a thing. It takes you to entertain one thought through any of your sense organs, and you being identified with it. That's it. Be ready. The mind will throw it back to you anytime. Is it the mind's fault? It was your fault. You found that interesting. So deal with it. It might surprise you, but it was you who entertained that thought. Why in the midst of our meditation, suddenly you are thinking about pizza? Ever wonder? There must be a logic behind. The nature of the mind is restlessness, agitation. I identify myself with the mind. I have to learn to discover the distance between the mind and I, who is the observer. Is it clear? Not complicated, right? Doesn't seem so. The mind can be mastered by practice and dispassion. The mind goes everywhere purely due to lack of interest. Constantly going anywhere. Huh? The neti-neti kind of thing. Not this, not this, not this. Until what? It finds something interesting. There is interest, therefore the mind keeps coming back to it. That's interesting, that is pleasurable. I like that. Problem. What are you looking for? The nature of the mind is to go everywhere whenever it finds interest or something more interesting. That's what happens to you during your meditation. All of a sudden, you are repeating the name of God. It's like, it could be somewhere else, huh? Therefore, without you trying to dwell upon anything in particular, the mind naturally will go towards the object that it finds more interesting. If we want to keep our minds busy, we have to constantly give the mind something more interesting. And that's on us. We have to trick the mind. There is no other way. We have to find our spiritual pursuit very, very interesting. Without this, it's complicated. Don't blame me or the scriptures or the saints. Don't think this is boring. You can't afford this. It's your experience. You need to be able to be quietly sitting by yourself in a room. So much as to fall in love with it, just as being with your beloved by your side. What are the sources of our interest? Objects of love, of course. The objects we fall in love with. Desires for happiness. The objects that will give us, or we think, that will provide us security and everlasting happiness. Those are the objects of our love. How do we deal with these objects? Well, Sri Krishna says, practice, let's talk about it. And then he brings up a very interesting word, vairagya. Literally means dispassion. But Shankara says, understanding the limitations of the objects. What is that? We see something, we think, and we create a fantasy around the object that it will fulfill us completely. It will give us happiness. You are superimposing an idea upon something that will not. You have to have the strength to sit with yourself and analyze exactly the object with objectivity. Not put your subject upon it. Your subject is nothing but your colors. This will give me happiness. You should be objective. What is this? It's subject to change. How long will it last? Will it give me fulfillment? That's Vairagya. That's the practice of dispassion. It will not. But I want it. Pay the price. Don't complain. Don't blame anybody but yourself. It's you that you still cling to this kind of play. This is caused by the superimposition, thinking that these objects will resolve the problem of fulfillment. You have enough experience. No object, no circumstances, no human being will provide that for you. Is that clear? If it is, good for you. There is hope. Attributes are superimposed upon certain objects, thinking that they will bring happiness and security, or achieving something that will change my present circumstances, or by seeking acceptance in others. Accept me, I'm good. You're good enough. You're enough with yourself. Attributes that do not belong to the object seem something that is not there. If the attributes are superimposed are pleasing, it creates infatuation, obsession, enchantment. Vairagya, the so-called dispassion, to be objective towards the reality, enables all of us to separate objective attributes of any object from the subjective superimposition on us. When superimposed attributes are understood as attributes that are superimposed upon objects, the object is reduced to its own status. Do you see it? It's us who keep looking for fulfillment where it's not. This indeed is an invitation to go within, to stop and ask yourself, what is truly important in my life? Should I keep walking like a dead man? Walking dead? It's either this or that, but it will never bring fulfillment. Not the one that we are looking for, like crazy. We have to be able to reduce the object to its own status. I know, ignorance is bliss. I'm sorry. Now you can't ignore it. You have to confront it. You have to do something about it. Therefore, we need our attention. We need to stay alert. We have to start from the scratch, no matter what, at any stage of our lives. It's never too late. Attention, seeing the limitations in the objects. Being able to practice this will help us in our emotional growth. Growth in terms of understanding these limitations on the objects, upon the objects, of the objects, and situations. Now, those are the objects of love. By love, I mean that attachment, not the true love. The ones you want to possess. What about other objects of your interest? The very first object of interest is this of our love. We need that to be fulfilled. Will you be fulfilled? The second object is the object of pain. You keep coming back to it. Is it true? Fear. It's natural. Don't be afraid. Aversion. No. This yes, this no. That's us. How do you deal with that? When you lose your balance, Krishna says, on one hand, you deal with your objects of love by understanding that superimposition is not real. See the reality as it is. On the other hand, you have to keep practicing. Practice of what? Well, it happened in chapter number 6. By then, he already explained practice. We have to have a relationship with something higher than us. Somehow, we have to give our minds a field of predictability so that in hard times, the minds fall back to something we can trust and does not change. What is that? The absolute. Your real nature. That we call God. Wait a minute, does God exist? Somebody must be responsible for all this. Of course. I put that question to one of my beloved Swami, very senior monk. He's now 99. It was funny because, we're all born and introduced to God in different ways. And you wonder, does God really exist? And falling in love with Vedanta, that God is everywhere and what we call God. And Vedanta says, thou art that. Then we are all incarnations of God. God manifests through us as us. With all our limitations, of course. We have to work with that limitation so that God manifests fully. And we become instruments of God. You okay with that? So I asked, does God really exist? And he said, yes. Took me some time. I contemplated upon this again and again. And I realized that it does. Once you merge in the ocean, there is no wave anymore. There is not you to doubt the existence of that. So, we have to have a relationship with this. We have to resort to this source. Unchanging. Where we can find solace. security. No relationship is more important than the one with God. Yes, I know. So, God again. That's you. We need to come back to ourselves. We need to resort to that reality. The means and the end is exactly the same. Therefore, attention to the sources of love that we think that will give us fulfillment and eternal bliss. And practice. Because they have it. It's so rooted in us. Do you agree? This is called abhyasa, constant practice. In verse number 36, just give me a few more minutes. Krishna says, this yoga of mine is indeed very difficult to attain. No kidding. But it can be gained by that whose mind is mastered. Who makes the right efforts by the proper means. Practice and understanding. And it's here. Understanding is essential. Stop blaming. Yoga is hard to attain by the uncontrolled self. He says, that is my conviction, of course. We don't doubt you, Krishna. But the self-controlled, striving by the right means, can obtain it. What are the right means? Vairagya, dispassion, being able to be objective, to see the reality of things as they are, to understand the limitations of the objects, situations, circumstances, anything that is subject to change. You need to understand it's not going to last long, and you will be in trouble again. And the second, give your mind a field to rest. And that resting field should be unchanging. That is the symbol of God. That's the reason why we have to relate to that higher power. This is spirituality. In Sanskrit, there is a word, it's called sambandha, which means relationship, a connection, a link, a bond, connectivity. Relationships are inevitable in our lives. From the moment we are born, and even before in the womb itself, we create a relationship with our own mothers. We create a relationship with our parents, family members, with the society. Not only relationships are inevitable, but they influence our lives deeply. All relationships affect us very deeply, both positively and negatively. You understand that? Our physical health is affected by relationship. Not only physical, mental conditions, emotions. Our performance in life is affected by relationships. success and failure, prosperity. Relationships are inevitable, and they play a very significant role in our lives. What is the most important relationship that you can have as a human being? Let that question bounce in your minds. We have to establish a relationship that aims to change us, to change all these habits, to transform us into real warriors. There are three types of relationships. The relationships as human beings we have with other living beings, particularly human beings. The relationships between embodied beings and the world. We keep messing up there. And the relationship between human beings and that we call God. The relationship between human beings are primary in our lives. All family relationships, because you walk away from this hall and then you go back to your relationships. Friends, neighbors, customers, they're in the bookstore. It begins with the connection. And the connection starts from the womb itself, with our mothers. What does the mother do? Starts talking with the baby. Those who are mothers can understand this. Creating a bond. How about the relationship between embodied beings and the world? Well, we know that. Without air, without water, without earth, we won't be able to survive here. We have a heaven, and we keep looking for something, somewhere else. Now in Mars, I hear. Instead of taking care of this beautiful, amazing world that we have, honoring it, respecting it, what do? Let me take as much petroleum and precious stones. I don't care about plastic. At last, the relationship with God. Now, as I said before, we are all introduced to God when we are kids, mostly. We don't question it. You are born in a religion, boom, here is your God. Oh, he's God. Just do what I say. Go to church, confess, admit your sins, be good, do good, period. It is small. There is a meaning behind all that. We are grown-up people now. We can sit down and think about it. All the other worldly relationships are all unpredictable, uncontrollable, unsustainable, because they will all be subject to change. So don't complain. Just know the reality as it is, just as you know the reality of objects. Don't superimpose something, not even a human being who is constantly changing, who doesn't know himself or herself. Today I love you, tomorrow, I change my mind. Where can I sign the papers? We are all fragile. And even the strongest relationship is limited by time. We'll all die eventually. There is a need to establish, a bonding relationship between us and the unchangeable God. Why, again? That's the source of practice. That's the reason why we have to practice. Because that won't change. That is the source of our strength. When you close your eyes and elevate a prayer, an intention, it's listened. All relationships are important, though. They all need to be preserved and nourished, no doubt about it. But most importantly, if we want to experience peace, if we want to be alone by ourselves in a quiet place, we need to take care and nourish the most important relationship. And that's practice. Do you understand? Practice in the form of prayer, meditation, relating to a higher power we call God. Are you okay? Can I take 8 more minutes maybe? All right, relax. Let's talk about how relationships are formed, preserved, and promoted. Because this is important for our practice. Again, we need to understand. We understood that we superimpose ideas, fantasies upon objects. Let's talk about these relationships. How do we nourish them? Preserve them. In the example of a mother with a child, how is the bond between the mother and the baby created? Right from the pregnancy. Whatever the mother is doing, one part of her mind is constantly aware of her baby. I wish I could be a mother, but must be for an experience, no? Constantly aware of her baby. But you can also relate to that with something that you deeply love, or when you fall in love with something or somebody. Her baby is growing inside her at the thought level. The mother has the baby in her mind, constantly talking. Good morning, how are you doing today? This is a form of meditation. You can also practice the same with your relationship with God. Once the baby is born, not only at the thought level, there is a bonding or takes place, but it develops into language. There is communication. Now first, it started with the thought, then language. When in the womb, the baby understands our own language. Then it's reinforced by this one-on-one relationship, education, giving the best to the kid. And also physical bonding. Come here, give me a kiss, give me a hug. I love you. You express that. That creates a strong bonding. True? Guess what? In the same way, we have to nurture the most important relationship in our lives. That's how you meditate. That's how you fall in love. Where is that God you call God? Within you. It's there, always, all the time, doesn't go anywhere. Ever present. You know that. You should use the same means of communication when it comes to God. All these rituals themselves may not be the end, but they are meant to keep in the bond. You have a relationship with a teacher, put flowers, beautiful garland on this image. You create a relationship, you nurture it. That light stays alive. Therefore, we have to give the mind a field of predictability. Because when we have God, we don't need anything else. When we are okay with ourselves, we are okay with everybody. We have to constantly nurture our relationship with God by constant practice, so that we can find peace and tranquility while trying to keep an objective outlook. That's the warrior part. You are all your weapons, your attention. The objective outlook about the reality of the sense objects. They will never give you what you're looking for. Nothing in the world is going to give you what you're looking for. A wise person, on the other hand, does not depend on anything for his or her fulfillment, because the self is already full. The wise person is one who is happy without depending upon any object or situation. We have to accept the nature of the mind and deal with it. We have to give the mind a field of rest. Then only mastery is possible. We have to find interest, capital interest, in mastering our minds. Deeply interested in our inner peace, then only we pay attention. Then only we care. Not by trying to control the mind, but by understanding how it works. And we better find this activity super entertaining and interesting so that we don't get bored. Spiritual boredom? No way. You cannot get bored. You can't afford to get bored in your spiritual life. You cannot get bored in your relationship with God. He is your beloved, your inner peace. What are you talking about? How do you dare get bored? Cheer up. Come on, start again. Renew your commitments. Remember the reality. If we do, we need to stop and analyze the reasons why we took the commitment to lead a God-centered life and renew that commitment. Knowing and being reminded that there is no other way out of this maze. There is no way out. Only through Him. We call it Him. call her too, mother. We have to confront ourselves, deal with ourselves, and find peace within ourselves. We have to find the solution to the human problem and be able to sit quietly in a room alone with our beloved, by ourselves. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Thank you.